This is always a natural time to pause and reflect on the year we've had, what we've accomplished, the challenges we've worked through, and the lessons that will guide us moving forward. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome my fellow board members, Vice Chair Michelle Yan, Secretary Maura Marino, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty, Board Member Leah. This is always a natural time to pause and reflect on the year we've had. Board Member Tony Williams and challenges Board Member Jim and the lessons that will guide us moving forward. This year was notable for many reasons. I'd like to welcome my fellow board members. Actually, I'm going to pause. Our Vice Chair Michelle Yan, Secretary Maura Marino, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty. Apologies. All right, there we go. So before we begin, I'd like to welcome my fellow board members, Vice Chair Michelle Yan, Secretary Maura Marino, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty, Board Member Leah Crucy, Board Member Tony Williams, and Board Member Jim Sandman. This year was notable for many reasons. First, we celebrated 30 years of public charter schools in Washington, D.C. For 3 decades, public charter schools have expanded opportunity, delivered strong results for students, and become an essential part of our city's public education landscape. This milestone gave us an opportunity to reflect on the vision, courage, and commitment that built this sector and the responsibility we have to ensure it continues to thrive for the next 30 years. This was also a year of transition and growth for our board. I had the privilege of stepping into the role of chair, and we welcomed 3 new board members who brought fresh perspective, new insights, and a commitment to public service. Together, we continued the important work of stewarding this organization and advancing its mission. At the same time, this school year unfolded against a backdrop of uncertainty for many students and families. Across our city's communities, they grappled with concerns about immigration enforcement, increased federal presence, and broader questions about safety, stability, and belonging. Many students walked into classrooms carrying worries that extended far beyond academics. And yet, throughout these challenges, our schools remained places of learning, support, and hope. School leaders, educators, staff, and families demonstrated resilience and again reminded us why this work matters. When I think about this year's work as a board, one word comes to mind: impact. As board members, we spent a lot of time reviewing policies, considering DC PCSB professional staff recommendations, discussing data, and casting votes. But our work is ultimately not about decisions alone. It is about the impact those decisions have on students, families, educators, and communities across Washington, D.C. And when I say data, I mean more than numbers on a page. We certainly review academic performance, enrollment trends, attendance rates, and financial reports. Those metrics matter, but also consider the stories behind those numbers. We listen to school leaders, teachers, students, families, and community members. We visit schools, attend graduations, celebrate milestones, and participate in events across the city that allow us to see firsthand the impact of our decisions and the incredible work happening in schools every single day. The best decisions are informed by both evidence and experience. They require us to understand not only what is happening in schools, but why it's happening. Throughout this year, this board has worked hard to balance quantitative data with qualitative insights, ensuring that our decisions are grounded in both accountability and the lived experiences of the communities we serve. This year, we evaluated charter renewals and continuances, considered school expansions and amendments, advanced the implementation of Aspire, approved new charter goals, and engaged in important conversations about accountability, governance, community complaints, transparency, and school quality. Whew, that's a list. We work to balance innovation with responsibility and autonomy with accountability, all in service of ensuring students have access to excellent schools. Some of those conversations were difficult. Many required thoughtful debate and careful consideration. But that is what good governance demands. And I'm pleased how this board has approached those responsibilities with rigor, respect, and a shared commitment to our mission. The lesson I take away from this year is that progress requires both reflection and resolve. We must learn from what worked, be honest about what didn't, and remain focused on the students and families who depend on us to get it right. Tonight is also bittersweet because it marks the final board meeting for our colleague, Leah Crucy. We will have the opportunity to formally recognize her contributions shortly. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Walker Davis.
Thank you, Chair Adam Afanian, and good evening, board members and our viewing audience. As the 2025 school year comes to a close, tonight gives us an opportunity to reflect on what we've accomplished. From the work led by our professional staff to the important decisions made by this board, and to consider the lessons we've learned as we renew our commitment and prepare for the work ahead. To ground that reflection, I'd like to briefly revisit our strategic roadmap and share how DCPCSB's professional staff have advanced our agency's priorities during the first year of implementation. At the beginning of this year, we introduced DCPCSB's 2025 to 2028 strategic roadmap, a 3-year plan designed to strengthen our impact as an authorizer while advancing our 3 strategic priorities: excellent schools, enduring partnerships, and an effective organization. You can learn more about the strategic roadmap on our website. The roadmap includes 5 agency-wide objectives that help ensure every department is moving in the same direction and working toward the same goal, creating the conditions for schools and students to thrive. As we close year 1, I am proud to report that staff successfully met 72% of the applicable key results across all agency objectives. While we did not meet every target we set for ourselves, the results demonstrate meaningful progress and, just as importantly, provide clarity on where to focus our efforts next. Several accomplishments stand out. This year, we made significant progress implementing Aspire, strengthening our financial oversight practices, improving the quality and timeliness of our data systems, engaging school leaders and relevant parties in new ways, and investing in our professional staff and organizational culture. Each of these efforts represent important foundational work that will strengthen our effectiveness as an authorizer for years to come. Our first objective was to implement the Aspire system. This year marked a major milestone in our transition to Aspire, DCPCSB's academic accountability framework. 51 LEAs adopted Aspire as their charter goals, an increase from the number of schools who adopted our performance management framework, demonstrating growing confidence in the system and a shared commitment to a more transparent, outcomes-focused approach to accountability. Building on the foundation established last year when 61 LEAs successfully completed the school-specific performance measure approval process, staff continued the hard work of moving Aspire from design to implementation. We improved data delivery systems, strengthened our support for schools as they navigated the transition, and successfully met every applicable key result associated with this objective. What makes this accomplishment especially meaningful is that it reflects more than an academic accountability system. It reflects the collaboration, trust, and partnership required to implement meaningful change across the sector while keeping students' outcomes at the center of our work. Our second objective focused on enhancing the effectiveness and impact of our oversight practices. This work included strengthening governance oversight, developing clearer approaches to financial accountability, and building tools that will help us identify challenges earlier and respond more effectively. One accomplishment worth highlighting here is our partnership with Yield Creative. Together, my staff and board members began developing shared language around fiscal accountability and financial oversight. While that work will continue into next year, establishing common definitions and expectations is a critical step toward stronger governance and more consistent decision-making. In fact, later this evening, the board will consider opening our proposed financial oversight policy for public comment, another important step in that journey. Our third objective focused on advancing transparent, data-informed decision-making. Data is, in fact, at the heart of effective authorizing. This year, we improved internal processes, strengthened data collection systems, and enhanced review and renewal workflows. As a result, data was submitted earlier and more consistently, allowing staff and the board to engage in deliberation sooner and with greater confidence. These improvements strengthen both the quality of our analysis and our recommendation. Our fourth objective focused on engagement. Throughout the year, we work to strengthen relationships with school leaders, families, trustees, and community partners. We know that effective authorizing depends not only on strong oversight, but also on trust, communication, and partnership. One example of this work was the launch of our Why a Charter video series, which helps families better understand the diverse educational opportunities available across the district and highlights the impact public charter schools have on students and communities. Our final objective focused on our people, the professional staff of the DC PCSB. The success of this organization depends on their talent, expertise, and dedication. This year, we invested in professional development, operational improvements, and initiatives designed to strengthen collaboration and organizational culture. While we did not meet every target we set for ourselves, we've learned valuable lessons about how to better support staff, strengthen our systems, and continue building a high-performing organization. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from year one. What I am most proud of is not simply what we accomplished, but how we approach the work. We remain committed to learning, adapting, and improving. Some initiatives exceeded expectations, others revealed opportunities for growth, and some required us to slow down, listen, and rethink our approach. But all of them collectively moved us forward. The progress here reflected in what I just highlighted belongs to a dedicated staff, engaged school leaders, committed partners, and a board that has provided thoughtful guidance, strategic direction, and an unwavering support throughout the year. As we continue year two of our strategic roadmap, we do so with a stronger foundation, a clearer understanding of our opportunities, and a renewed commitment to serving students and families across the district. Before I turn it back over to Chair Adamofanian, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two individuals whose leadership has had a profound impact on public charter schools in Washington, D.C. First, I'd like to congratulate Patricia Brantley, CEO of Friendship Public Charter Schools, on her induction into the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools Hall of Fame. This is a well-deserved honor that recognizes Pat's decades of leadership, advocacy, and unwavering commitment to expanding quality educational opportunities for our students. Pat, congratulations on this remarkable achievement. We are proud to celebrate this recognition with you. And while we're recognizing extraordinary leaders, I'd also like to acknowledge board member Leah Cruzy. Leah has been an important partner since my very first day at DCPCSB. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working alongside her through periods of growth, challenge, and transformation. As board chair for much of my tenure, she helped guide this organization through significant milestones, difficult decisions, and moments of opportunity. What I've always admired about Leah is her ability to balance accountability with humanity. She asks tough questions, expects excellence, and encourages rigorous thinking, but she never loses sight of the people behind the policies and the decisions we make. She understands that effective governance is not simply about oversight, it's about stewardship. Leah has helped lead this board through a period of remarkable change, including the development of our strategic roadmap, the evolution of our academic accountability system, and as we continue to celebrate these 30 years of public charter schools in Washington, D.C. Her leadership has left a lasting mark on this organization. On a personal note, Leah, thank you for your partnership, your candor, your wisdom, and your friendship. It has truly been an honor to serve alongside you. On behalf of the professional staff, Leah, we are grateful for all you have given to this board, this organization, and this city. We wish you every success and happiness in the chapter ahead. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Adamofania.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker Davis, and thank you for kicking us off as we celebrate Leah and all of her contributions. And so before we move to public comment, I'd like to take a few moments to recognize Leah, whose service to this board has made a lasting impact on this agency and the students and families that we serve. Tonight, again, as you've heard, marks Leah's final board meeting. Leah joined the board, the DC Public Charter School Board, in December 2018, and over nearly 8 years of service has helped guide this board through some of the most significant moments in our recent history. As board colleagues, we navigated the challenges of COVID-19, made difficult decisions regarding school accountability and charter continuance, supported schools through reopening and recovery, welcomed a new executive director. I would add, welcome new board members, including myself. We've dealt with We've also said farewell to other executive directors, advanced Aspire, strengthened our oversight practices, and helped lead the sector through a period of tremendous change and growth. Leah has been a partner throughout my entire tenure on this board. She has brought wisdom, integrity, and thoughtfulness to every discussion. She asks questions, not to create obstacles, but to ensure we make the best possible decisions for students. Leah has the ability to balance accountability with empathy. She understands that governance requires both rigor and a human touch. She challenged us to think deeply, and listen thoughtfully as we pursued our decision making. Public service is often measured in meetings, votes, and policies, but it is true impact that is found in the institutions we strengthen and the lives we improve. Leah's contributions have strengthened this board, this agency, this sector, and ultimately the educational opportunities available to thousands of students across the district. Again, personally, Leah, thank you so much for your mentorship and your guidance, even as I've stepped into this chair role. You are incredible, and I appreciate you deeply. And so at this time, I'd like to invite my fellow board members to offer words of appreciation to celebrate Leah. Jim, why don't you kick us off?
It's been a pleasure and an honor to serve with Leah for the last 7 years. Leah, I want to thank you and commend you for the quality of your service. When I think about my experiences with Leah over a substantial period of time, 3 things come to mind. The first is the ferocity of her passion for the mission. Leah is an educator at heart. Student-centeredness drives her. A commitment to quality and accountability drives her. What she wants is a high-quality public education for every student in the District of Columbia. She is uncompromising in her decision-making in following those goals. Second is her commitment to public service. Members of this board are all volunteers. Every member of this board has a full-time job and a number of other commitments, including families. And for Leah, I think the toll of public service has to have been considerable, both because of the complexity of the issues she's had to deal with, which Michelle and Shakura have already described, but also because of her personal circumstances. By my count, Leah's service on this board has consumed more than half of the lives of her 2 children. Think about that. And she treated this as a full-time job. If I hadn't known otherwise, I would have thought that she was devoted full-time to this, that was the extent of her commitment and her availability. I think the public, Leah, should be grateful for your service. You're a model of what citizen leadership, volunteer leadership means. Thank you for that. And finally, it's the way Leah treats people. She always, always treats people with respect, with dignity, with empathy. She listens. She gives people an opportunity to be heard. And I've seen it over and over again in the way she deals with her fellow board members, in the way she deals with staff, and the way she deals with school leaders and parents and teachers and students, the way she treats graduation audiences, and in the way she treated me. I was vice chair of the board during the time that Leah was chair. And thank you, Leah, for including me as a teammate and a collaborator. I valued our time together. Everything you do and the way you deal with other people is inflected with grace and kindness and caring. And that just reflects on your character as a person. We've noticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Salmon. Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair. Leah, you were the first person that I met when I was appointed to this board, and you took me to, I won't call it lunch, it was like a late breakfast, but you took me to a late breakfast. I'll never forget it. And thinking about it now, it was appropriate that you were the first person that I met and that you were the introduction to this board, because you are the perfect role model for a board member for this board. When I thought about you tonight and how I would describe you, there were three words that came to mind. It was kindness, which I think Jim said already. It was professionalism, and it was commitment. The kindness to board members, but also the kindness that you demonstrated to me personally. You treated me with a high degree of respect in professional settings, but also in a personal setting where you extended yourself to me and you didn't have to. So you did that because that's who you are as a person. And I didn't forget that, and I won't ever forget that. You have taught me that in service, we learn a lot about each other. And it doesn't mean that you will always agree with the person, but you learn who someone is when you see them lead and when you see them serve. And that is what I take away from my experience with you, is how you led this board and how you served as a board member. And I stand firm in my statement that you are a role model to all of us. So thank you for your kindness to me, and thank you for your commitment to this sector.
Thank you. Vice Chair Yan.
Thank you. I could echo everything that Jim and Carissa have said for many more minutes, but I'll just add, even for my own onboarding, I can say that I had the exact same experience as Carissa, and even though those were years apart, I think it speaks to your steadfast approach to leadership. And even from that very first conversation, I think I went into that coffee with a million tactical questions of how should I read the board book? How do I consume all of this information? And what you did was like really ground me in an empathetic systems perspective on the historic context of the sector, the trajectory of the board, where we'd come from, where we were going. And that is what I needed a million times more than how to navigate a million pages of documents. And so you've been a tremendous, steadfast leader. The amount of time and energy that you've dedicated is no small contribution. Jim put it in terms of your children. I'll put in terms of, I think, you stated yourself you've missed one board meeting over your entire tenure as a board member. And if you think about just the years of those individual board meetings, it is not something that any of us should take for granted. And you truly are a role model to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Yan. To be clear, though, Leah's approach to managing all of the emails and all of the things, Leah, I don't know if you remember, you gave me a tip about keeping the email open. Bar none. Fantastic. So you're really good at it. So thank you. Secretary Marino.
Leah, I just want to add my huge thanks to you for your tremendous public service and your leadership on this board. When Shakura was just going through the list of the challenges that you faced during your tenure on the board, it's hard to imagine a more diverse and complicated set of circumstances that we've found ourselves in. And as everyone has described, you've been a steadfast leader throughout that time. And what I've really admired is that you've brought your head, your heart, and your hands to every challenge. It's truly your full self. And we've needed all of those things, and we've been lucky to have your huge brain, the incredible depth of your heart, and the time that you've brought with your hands to this work has been amazing. So thank you. I have had the good fortune for a long time to call you my friend and to call you a colleague. But in the last 6 months, I've also been able to call you my mentor on this board. Thank you for taking me under your wing in this new way in the last 6 months. And as others have said, particularly Michelle's remarks, like you've just been there with advice I didn't know I needed, but has been really, really helpful as I've come up the learning curve on what it is to be an effective member of this board. So thank you for being a role model. Thank you for the time and for the leadership.
Thank you. And take us home, Board Member Williams.
My pleasure. I think I just want to chime in and with everyone else and take a moment, Leah, to just thank you for your service to the board, to the students, to the families of the district. You've heard it from everyone else, but I'll just chime in it too. Like you bring a thoughtfulness, an optimism, and just a belief in what the kids of DC can achieve and what we can, and what they deserve. Um, you know, your work has been meaningful. Like it's created the conditions for thousands of and hundreds of thousands of students to thrive, and for families to have that access to really, really just excellent public charter school options, and that's just so important. And personally, I just can't thank you enough for the support and the mentorship that you've given me over the years. Whether it was, during my time with LEA's, Washington Leadership Academy and others, or whether it's been since I've joined the Charter School Board. I mean, I can honestly say that I wouldn't be serving on this board without your encouragement, your guidance, and your belief in me. So, just thank you. Thank you for your friendship, for your leadership, for your clarity of purpose, and just the care that you bring to this work. So thank you, and look forward to crossing paths in the future.
Thank you all. Thank you, Board Member Williams, and thank you to the rest of my colleagues for all of your remarks. Leah, please see this as just a token of our appreciation. And I'd also like to offer you the opportunity to share a few words, please.
Thank you, everybody. That's for your very, very kind words, and for the opportunity to serve alongside each one of you. I do have some remarks I would love to share. So like many of us here, I grew up as a child in public schools with a mom as a teacher. I entered the classroom as part of a multi-generational movement to correct a mismatch with which we are all too familiar. The innate potential we know to be true in all people versus the disparate outcomes that hold back too many from a secure and fulfilling life. My responsibility to fulfill that promise for every student still drives me today. So more than 2 decades later from when I entered that classroom, I look at this through a few more lenses. I'm now a parent of 2 students here in the District of Columbia, a rising 3rd grader who has been at an expeditionary learning charter since she was 3, and a rising 6th grader at another charter school that challenges her to access and master rigorous content. Watching my own children move through our city's schools, I'm reminded that this work was here before and will go on long after. That's the inheritance. It is collective, it is multi-generational, and it is unfinished. Which brings me here. In 2018, Mayor Bowser, who has served this city for 3 historic terms, appointed me to this board, and I'm so grateful she did. For nearly 8 years, including through his chair, I've had the privilege of serving this city, its schools, and its families. It's been more hours than I can count, both rewarding and challenging in equal measure. Leadership in public life means making decisions that will always leave someone disappointed. And I've not always gotten it right, I know it. Know that with every action and every single moment of service, I have felt the weight and long view of what this inheritance asks of me and for the success of every learner in the city. Because it is an inheritance. It is a multi-generational collective effort to demand, innovate, and improve opportunities to learn. 30 years ago, charters came on the scene to accelerate progress, and we build onto that inheritance every day together. And that inheritance has shown up in many ways. When I was chair, it was signing my name to every degree conferred by this agency on behalf of the District of Columbia, standing at graduation after graduation, bearing witness to the joy of accomplishment of young people, for adult learners, for their families, and feeling that full weight of what that moment represents. That moment is possible because of the care that this staff brings to every question before us. These are not abstractions, it's what the work looks like. And Aspire is part of that same inheritance. Our revised accountability framework is not a final answer. It is a living articulation of what we believe schools owe students and what we owe schools in return. An honest, multidimensional account of how they're doing and why it matters. We will keep refining it as we implement it. That is the point. To everyone who has been part of this work, staff, school leaders in your communities, board colleagues, past and present, LEA boards, parents and advocates, thank you. You have taught me, you've shown up again and again with commitment and care and seriousness of that purpose. That's what this inheritance asks, and you answer it every day. A few people I want to name directly. To Madam Chairwoman, our journey in service to young people started long before this board and will continue long after. You've got this. To Dr. Walker Davis, you are a model of integrity, commitment, and grace and leadership. It has been such a privilege. To LEA boards, you hold the charter. The autonomy for accountability bargain only works when governance is close to the community and grounded in student success. Thank you for your volunteer service and holding that line. And I want to say something about the world these students are walking into. The workforce is being remade by technology in ways none of us can fully predict. That uncertainty should make us more curious and more focused. And to those students, from the earliest learners to the most seasoned, soak up all you can, go and do good here in your neighborhood or in far-flung communities across our world. The world needs you more than you know, and we will keep working to be worthy of you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Leah. While your term may be coming to an end, the impact of your service will continue for years to come. And even in your remarks, you still center our students, the promise of our sector, and just your commitment to the fact that we can get it right. So thank you. And so if we could, colleagues, and everybody else out there, if you would please join me in one final time in thanking Leah for her nearly 8 years of dedicated service to the DC Public Charter School Board. Let's come off of mute and clap for her, y'all. Like we were in the same room. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I hope everyone can hear that. Leah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Leah.
All right. Thank you so much. At the beginning of every board meeting, we reserve time to hear testimony from members of the public who've signed up to speak. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes, and public officials may speak for up to 5 minutes. If you have additional thoughts you'd like to share beyond your allotted time, we welcome written testimony, which can be emailed to public.comment@dcpcsb.org. To register to speak or submit written comment, please visit our website at dcpcsb.org under the Public Comment tab. You can also email comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or leave voicemail testimony by calling 202-328-2660 and selecting option 2. All submitted comments are available on our website. As I call your name, you will be promoted from the attendee pool and unmuted. Let's first hear from Dr. Tracy White. You have 2 minutes to speak. Welcome.
All right. Good evening. Good evening, Chair.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, especially Board Member Cruzy, who I would like to also send sincere thanks for her service. We're going to miss you. And thank you for everything that you've done, for the graduations that you've attended. We've loved having you there. And also good evening to Dr. Walker Davis. Again, my name is Dr. Tracy White, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of Paul Public Charter Schools. Also have had the privilege of leading Paul Public Charter School now for a decade. And over the course of this decade, as an organization, we have welcomed accountability, embraced continuous improvement, and built a culture where data informs our decisions every single day, which is precisely why I'm here tonight in support of the proposed one-year acclimation period. This is not a request to lower expectations. I want to be very clear about that. As a charter leader, a very ardent educator in Washington, D.C., 10 years at Paul, 30 years in the district, no one wants to ever shy away from accountability. No one ever wants to lower expectations. And what this is, in fact, is a request to ensure that high stakes decisions are based on valid, reliable, and comparable data. That's critical. Next year, every school in the district will transition to DC Cape Next, using the Smarter Balance assessment system. Because this is an entirely new assessment system, we will not be able to calculate student growth during the first year. That is critical. Without 2 years of comparable assessment data, growth simply can't be measured, and growth is one of the foundational components of the Aspire framework, which is our accountability framework that the board uses to determine whether or not our charter schools are meeting their goals. Research and national practice consistently show that the first administration of a new statewide assessment often produces changes in proficiency rates that reflect new standards, new cut scores, and student and educator adjustment to the assessment, not actual declines in school quality. That is why states and authorizers across the country have routinely implemented hold harmless or transition years when adopting new assessments. DC PCSB did exactly that when we transitioned from DC CAS to PARC. At Paul, we've spent years building strong instructional systems and improving outcomes for our scholars. Treating 26-27 as though it was an ordinary accountability year would risk presenting a misleading picture, not just for our school, but for schools across the sector. So in closing, I will do two things. I will email my full comments because I'm out of time, but I would also just say that we are not asking for accountability to pause. There's not an educator in the charter sector or DCPS or beyond that that would ever look for that. What we are asking is that accountability remain worthy of the trust that we place in it. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you for your comments. Next, I'd like to invite Justin Lessick. And Justin, I really hope I'm saying your name right, so please correct me if I am not. Hi, Justin, welcome.
Hey, thank you. And you nailed it with my name, so thank you.
All right, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Good evening, Chair, board members, staff. My name is Justin Lessick. I'm the Executive Director at Sojourner Truth Public Charter School. And before I continue, I just really quickly want to take a second to express appreciation for Board Member Crucy for the very positive impact you've had on Sojourner Truth and the leadership you've modeled to me personally. Thank you. Thank you to all for the opportunity to speak this evening in support of the proposed one-year acclimation period. Similar to what Dr. White said, this is not a request to weaken accountability. It's a request to make sure that the data being used to inform high-stakes decisions is meaningful and valid. 26-27 school year will be the first with a new statewide assessment. Treating it as an ordinary accountability year risks creating a misleading picture of school performance. We know when assessments change, scores often shift because that assessment has changed, not necessarily because teaching or learning has changed. OSSI already recognized this reality by announcing that student growth measures will not be calculated until the new assessment has been in place more than a year. But Aspire was intentionally designed to place significant weight on growth, which is great. But producing Aspire scores without growth fundamentally changes the framework the board adopted. Like Dr. White said, it's also consistent with established practice to have an acclimation period. The proposed policy is also the product of months of stakeholder engagement. Many LEAs, including ours, have established goals and made strategic decisions based on the likelihood of a reasonable acclimation period. Importantly, this is only a one-year accommodation. It does not pause accountability. The board will still have 4 years of performance data available for renewals and reviews. What it does ensure is that consequential decisions are made using measures that accurately reflect school performance. Finally, if any material changes are proposed to the policy this evening, I would respectfully ask that those changes be subject to the same public review and comment process as the original proposal. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration and for your continued commitment to fair, transparent, and evidence-based accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lessick. Much appreciation. Last for our public comment tonight, again, please correct me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Diamani Bacon. Do we see Diamani?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can. How are you?
I'm blessed. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I like that. Might you pronounce your first name for me? I want to make sure I said it properly.
Diamani.
Diamani, thank you so much. Please begin.
Yeah, so I'll start. 1 second, I need to pull it back up. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm trying.
It's okay.
Because I'm bad at speaking, so I wrote it down.
I'm sure you're gonna be great. I trust you.
Now, good evening. My name is Damani Bacon. I am the parent of Ariana Carter, a student with autism and an IEP who attended DC Prep. I'm here today asking the DC Public Charter School Board to review DC Prep handling of my daughter's bullying, safety, disability supports, and retaliation concerns, parent complaint process, and involuntary safety transfer. My daughter had already been the subject of documented bullying. DC Prep's own bully investigation found that bullying did occur against Ariana based on her personal appearance. A safety plan was also created because DC Prep knew Ariana needed protection, separation from certain students, supervision, counseling check-ins, and adult support. On or about September 23rd, 2025, I came to DC Prep with serious evidence, including text messages, threats, and a video of a fight that occurred on 4/28/2025 that they classified as mutual combat. Um, I bought this evidence because I was advocating for my daughter's safety, asking the school to reinvestigate that fight and reinvestigate the bullying filings. Instead of DC Prep immediately opening a bullying investigation into my concerns, I was barred from the school the very next day on September 24th, 2025. DC Prep did not open the bullying investigation into they didn't open the bullying investigation that I came to them with in September until November 2025. That is one of my biggest concerns because DC Prep responded quickly to bar me, but did not respond quickly to investigate the bullying threats, the videos that were sent to my daughter's phone, and safety concerns that I brought towards for my daughter. I'm asking PCSB to review whether DC Prep retaliated against me for advocating for my daughter and bringing evidence to the school. I am also concerned that DC Prep did not include all of my text messages, screenshots, and evidence I submitted for review. I sent more evidence than what DC Prep included in the reports. I was later told the investigation would be reopened or reviewed. And then a week later, once Laura Mantez got involved, they told me that they were not willing to reopen the investigation and that it is what it is. I'm also raising a concern that DC Prep has denied me a meaningful opportunity to be heard by the full DC Prep board. Laura Mantez keep telling me that DC Prep will not revisit this topic, but I have never had an opportunity to present my concerns to the full DC Prep board. I only spoke with Ms. Mantez and DC Prep's lawyer, Laura Baum. Ms. Mantez and Ms. Baum have refused to allow me to speak to the full board, even though my concerns involve serious issues about bullying, retaliation, disability protections, school safety, parent access, and the way DC Prep handled my child's transfer. My daughter has autism and an IEP. DC Prep knew she had social environment needs, peer interaction needs, executive functional needs, and a need for adult support, clear expectations, structural support, and the behavior service. I'm concerned that DC Prep treated disability-related and bullying-related issues as discipline and safety problems instead of providing proper protection, support, and dual process. After that, DC Prep relied on safety allegations, text messages, and mutual compact language to support major decisions, including the safety transfer from Benning campus to Edgewood campus. But I am asking for review because I do not believe DC Prep fairly investigated the bullying, fairly considered all evidence, and fairly considered Ariana's disability needs before making those decisions. I am asking the board to decide everything. I'm not asking the board to decide everything tonight, but I am asking PCSB to formally review this matter and require DC Prep to provide a written timeline and explanation. Specifically, I'm asking PCSB to require DC Prep to explain why was I barred the day after I brought bullying evidence to the school, why my bullying concerns from September 2025 was not investigated until November 2025. Why all of my text messages, screenshots, videos, and evidence that was not included a part of the investigation, and why did they take mostly the other parents' information and not mine?
Excuse me, I'm so sorry, Miss Diamani. I apologize for interrupting. I would just name that the allotted time we've gone over a bit, and I wanted to make sure we heard you because I know in the beginning you were trying to find your speech. What I would ask if you ensure that you send your public comments to the email address that I named at the top of the meeting. Also, staff will be in contact. We will pass this along to our community complaint team. They will follow up with you if they haven't already started the process. So again, my sincere apology for cutting you off, but we will follow up with this with you. So thank you. I appreciate you. And you did well. Don't worry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you to our speakers this evening. This concludes the public comment portion of our agenda. All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Adamafanian.
Aye.
Vice Chair Yan.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Sandman.
Aye.
Board Member Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
And I am an aye. The motion carries.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we will be voting on several new or revised policies. First up are the Aspire Policy and Technical Guide and the Charter Goals Policy, which we'll be considering together as sister policies. I yield the floor to Kirsten James Floyd, Director in the School Performance Department, to introduce the policies.
Good evening. My name is Kirsten James Floyd, and I'm a director in the School Performance Department. Tonight, staff is recommending the board approve the proposed updates to the Aspire Policy and Technical Guide and the Charter Goals Policy. The Aspire Policy and Technical Guide and the Charter Goals Policy are sister policies that define DCPCSB's academic accountability system. The Aspire Policy and Technical Guide establishes how school performance is measured, evaluated, and communicated. The Charter Goals Policy establishes how schools' charter goals are set, monitored, and assessed in charter reviews and renewals. Both proposals were open for public comment April 27, 2026 through May 18, 2026, when we held a public hearing. DCPCSB received 5 public comments on the Aspire Policy Technical Guide proposal and none on the Charter Goals Policy proposal. Upon reviewing the public comments, staff made minimal adjustments to the originally proposed revisions. As a reminder, the proposed revisions for the school year 26-27 Aspire Policy and Technical Guide fall into 3 main areas: updating floors and targets, clarifying select business rules, and establishing an acclimation period for schools impacted by the state assessment transition. The proposed Charter Goals Policy revisions incorporate the proposed 26-27 acclimation period provisions. Before the board discusses the proposed revisions and votes on the policies, staff has prepared a short presentation to summarize the proposal. Thank you. First, on the proposed revisions to floors and targets, staff proposes using school year 24-25 statewide and sector-wide data to establish floors and targets at the 10th and 90th percentiles respectively. Using the school year 24-25 data also allows DCPCSB to communicate floors and targets earlier and support school planning for the upcoming school year. DCPCSB staff proposes revisions to floors and or targets for 4 measures in the adult education framework, which employs other approaches to setting floors and targets, including consideration of national performance outcomes and aspirational targets. Staff also proposes technical clarifications to select business rules within the high school and adult education frameworks. These clarifications have minimal impact on schools' overall Aspire outcomes. The final proposed revision establishes an acclimation period for school year 2026-27. This proposal applies to both the Aspire Policy and Technical Guide and the Charter Goals Policy. We'd first like to draw your attention to an update that's been made since the public hearing. Based on feedback from board members, DCPCSB staff proposes renaming the grace and acclimation period to simply the acclimation period. The term grace may unintentionally suggest that schools are exempt from accountability expectations during this period. The revised name more accurately reflects the intent of the approach, to provide schools with time to adjust to the new state assessment while remaining subject to oversight and performance monitoring. We'd like to take a step back and share why an acclimation period is best practice in this type of situation. When new state assessments are introduced, state education agencies and charter authorizers frequently implement temporary hold harmless provisions to address year-over-year data comparability challenges. This practice aligns with guidance from the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, which emphasizes establishing clear transition plans before using new test results for high-stakes accountability. States routinely adjust their frameworks during these transitions to ensure systemic fairness. For instance, New York's regulations explicitly allow for the creation of new baseline years and recalibration of interim targets when assessments or standards change. Similarly, Indiana, a state that is part of the Smarter Balance Consortium, established that schools could not receive lower accountability grades in the first year of its assessment transition. These precedents reflect a well-established national norm. Accountability consequences are paused or adjusted when system changes shift score baselines or performance distributions. Implementing a one-year acclimation period in response to DC's new state assessment directly aligns DCPCSB with these nationwide best practices, ensuring that subsequent school ratings remain valid, fair, and interpretable. The proposed acclimation period for school year 2026-27 responds to the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, or OSSE's, October 2025 announcement that it will launch an updated statewide assessment in school year 2026-27. Because OSSE will not calculate statewide assessment growth measures for that year, and proficiency results may shift as new scales and cut scores are established, state assessment data will be unavailable or potentially unreliable. This impacts schools evaluated under DCPCSB's pre-K to 8 and high school Aspire frameworks, as well as schools with individualized charter goals based on state assessment outcomes. Consequently, DCPCSB proposes a one-year acclimation period for school year 2026-27, implementing temporary adjustments to 4 key oversight practices directly impacted by this assessment transition: calculating Aspire outcomes, public reporting, charter goal attainment, and consequences for underperformance. Regarding Aspire outcomes, staff proposes calculating Aspire measure outcomes for school year 2026-27 performance for impacted schools, but not calculating summative scores or assigning Aspire levels for those schools' school year 2026-27 performance. Regarding public reporting, staff proposes publicly reporting all available school year 2026-27 Aspire measure outcomes, including state assessment proficiency, but not publicly reporting summative scores or Aspire levels for impacted schools. This mimics the measure level reporting we published back in March for school year 24-25 performance. Regarding charter goal attainment, staff proposes that school year 26-27 Aspire performance will not factor into the corresponding review period for impacted schools that adopted Aspire as their charter goals. For schools with individualized goals based on the state assessment, staff proposes that those goals be deemed immeasurable for school year 2026-27 in all charter review and renewal reports. Finally, regarding consequences for underperformance, staff proposes that schools demonstrating signs of weak or unsatisfactory performance based on available Aspire measure level outcomes remain ineligible to expand, replicate, or otherwise grow to serve more students. These shift impact portions of the charter goals policy regarding schools that have adopted Aspire as their charter goals, school year 26-27 goal attainment pathways, and consequences for underperformance. Upon approval, all the proposed revisions will apply to school year 2026-27 outcomes. As shown in this chart, schools impacted by the proposed acclimation period will have 4 years of goal determinations considered in charter reviews and renewals through school year 2031-32. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Kirsten. Before we begin our deliberations and ultimately our vote, I'd like to acknowledge the concerns we've heard earlier this evening from school leaders, as well as the concerns we heard during the charter leaders meeting held earlier this month. So sorry. At the meeting, we held a session focused, at the charter leaders meeting, we held a session focused on the transition to the new state assessment, and representatives from OSSE joined that conversation. During that discussion, school leaders shared concerns about the amount of time needed to prepare teachers, align instruction, and make key decisions related to implementation, like establishing performance floors and targets during a transition period, and questions about how student growth will be measured under the new assessment system. School leaders have been clear that they do not view school year 26-27 as an ordinary school year. They've expressed concerns that the transition to Aspire, combined with changes in assessment and accountability systems, could create an incomplete or potentially misleading picture of school performance during this period of adjustment. They've also reminded us that when accountability systems undergo significant changes, it's not uncommon for authorizers across the country to make temporary adjustments to how performance data is used in high-stakes decisions. In fact, when the district transitioned from DCCAS to Park, as shared earlier, in 2014, in the 2014-2015 school year, this board adopted a hold harmless approach and didn't use Park results in high stakes accountability decisions during the transition year. We also know that the recommendations before us do not emerge overnight. They reflect months of discussion, engagement, working group feedback, and public input. 51 schools adopted Aspire as their charter goals with the understanding that there would be a grace and acclimation period to support implementation for the schools impacted by the transition to the new assessment. At the same time, our responsibility as a board is to carefully consider all of the information before us and determine the best path forward for students, families, schools, and the sector as a whole. Tonight provides an opportunity to discuss these concerns openly and thoughtfully before we make a vote on those two important policies. We must also recognize that schools are already planning for the upcoming school year, and delaying a decision would create uncertainty for school leaders who need clarity about the accountability they will be operating under, how performance will be measured, and the expectations. Our responsibility is to provide that clarity as soon as possible to get stronger outcomes. It is also important to remember that the Charter Goals policy and the Aspire policy are complementary and interconnected. Some of the updates before us are routine in nature, clarifying calculations, refining metrics, and making technical adjustments. However, the question of the acclimation period has implications for both policies. The Charter Goals policy establishes how schools are held accountable for meeting their charter goals, while the Aspire policy and technical guide establishes the academic accountability framework and measures that inform those determinations. And so with that, I want to open up the floor for conversation, deliberation, and just comments from the board as we move forward with this. I'll now open the floor for discussion. And Board Member Sandman, I saw your hand go up, so I invite you to offer your remarks. Thank
you. Thank you, Chair. I want to emphasize what is and is not on the board's agenda for tonight. We are not voting on whether or not we should consider DC CAPE 2.0 results for 2026-27. What's before us is a vote on what to put out for public comment. We are obligated to consider the public comments we receive before we vote at a later public meeting on whether we should consider CAPE 2.0 results. I support the staff recommendation. I believe it should be put out for public comment as is. I believe that I come to that conclusion for 4 reasons. First, the staff recommendation is consistent with what I understand to be recommended best practice and actual common practice nationally. The national standard is not to use results from a new test in the first year the new test is implemented. The highly respected local and national experts we retained to advise us recommended the approach that the staff has recommended. Second, the amendment is consistent with our own past practice to the established practice of the DC Public Charter School Board, which has been not to use new test results for school assessment purposes in the first year a new test is implemented. Third, I think the staff recommendation is correct on the merits. I think it is wise. The uncertainties and vicissitudes surrounding a new assessment tool counsel caution in its initial use. That is the reason for the national standard and for our own past practice. If the rationale for using the DC CAPE 2.0 results in the first year were to be that we would not be able to make a decision to close a school, say, or to impose conditions without it, that's incorrect. We will have plenty of information to make high-stakes decisions. In fact, we'll have more information than we had last year when the available information was limited by the absence of data from the COVID years. We will have 4 years of regular goal outcome data. We will have 5 years of non-academic compliance and financial performance data. We will have a plethora of additional data for each of our school frameworks from non-state assessment Aspire measures for the most recent years. I would have a hard time in coming up with an example of a situation in which not using DC CAPE 2.0 results for 2026-27 would preclude us from making a significant decision about an LEA that we would and could make if we were to use DC CAPE 2.0 results for 26-27. Finally, I think I would be concerned about any change in the staff recommendation at this point. This issue first came up before the board last December, 6 months ago. And the staff recommendation at that time was the one we see before us now with regard to an acclimation period. The staff has discussed that proposal over many months with school leaders. I think school leaders understand that a staff recommendation is only that. It's not a board decision. The board would have to approve the staff recommendation before it would become effective. But I think it would be a mistake to deviate from the staff recommendation after all this discussion that we've had with charter school leaders. Where we are right now is facing a vote on what to put out for public comment. Yes, if we were to change the recommendation, the public would have an opportunity to comment on it. But the formality of the public comment process, it's all in writing with no discussion, no back and forth, no opportunity for the public to ask questions and get them answered in real time, is ill-suited to an issue as important to the one before us tonight if we were suddenly to change the recommendation of the staff. I respect the staff. I think they have this right. I think it would be a mistake to deviate from what they've recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, board members, Salmon. I appreciate your comments. I do have a couple of points of correction. Number one, this isn't a vote for public comment, but in fact, this is a vote on this policy as we opened up this policy for public comment in April. So I just want to name that and make sure that we are clear on tonight. But again, your points are well taken, well received, and I appreciate you giving your thoughts.
That makes my comments even more pointed. Too late to make this change.
Thank you. Board Member Williams.
Well, thank you, Chair. I want to, I guess, speak briefly in support of the proposed amendment to the acclimation period language. I really, I appreciate the rationale for creating an acclimation period for school year 26-27. OSSI's transition to DC CAPE 2.0 is a significant statewide assessment change, and we should be thoughtful about how we use that first year of data and not allow an assessment transition to unfairly distort a school's accountability record. So I'm glad that under the proposal, growth measures will not be calculated in the first year, and that new proficiency scales and cut scores will be established. At the same time, I believe it is important and critical that the board remain clear that an acclimation period is not an accountability pause. And that's why I support the proposed amendment, because for me, it strikes that right balance. It recognizes that DC Public Charter School Board should not determine charter goal attainment for 26-27 for impacted schools that have adopted Aspire as their goals. But it also makes clear that the board may consider performance on overall available academic and non-academic measures as supplemental evidence when making high stakes decisions, including charter reviews and renewals. And for me, there are three key reasons why this matters. First, we have a responsibility to maintain accountability. Families, students, educators, and the public expect this board to make decisions based on the best information available to us. We should be cautious about overweighting a new assessment in its first year, but we should not blind ourselves to useful information. If the data is available, we should look at them, understand their limitations, and use them appropriately. Second, even with this transition, the board will still have 4 years of Aspire data available for schools undergoing reviews or renewals. The staff presentation made clear that this acclimation period does not prevent DC Public Charter School Board from making high stakes decisions about continuance, because reviews and renewals that include the 26-27 will still include 4 years of academic data and Aspire data. That matters. We're not making decisions based on a single test year. We're looking at a broad body of evidence. And then third, this amendment is about transparency with our LEAs. Schools deserve to know in advance how the board intends to treat this transition year. They shouldn't have to guess that the data will be ignored or used informally or applied inconsistently. By explicitly saying that we will consider all available academic and non-academic measures as supplemental evidence, we're being honest. We're being honest with ourselves. We're being honest with our school leaders, and we're setting a clear rules of the road. That's fair to schools. It's more transparent to the public, and it's more consistent with our role as an authorizer. That's why I support the amendment and support preserving fairness without weakening oversight. Because I think it allows us to acknowledge the limitations of DC CAPE 2.0 and its first year of data, while still using the full range of available information to make informed, responsible decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Williams, for your comment. Again, just a point of clarification here. An amendment has not been offered on the floor regarding staff recommendation. However, I do hear your points very clearly with respect to what you would want to see. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your comments. But again, just to be mindful for the public, an amendment has not been offered yet. We are just giving our commentary and sort of our perspectives as board members regarding this policy. Okay, thank you again, Board Member Williams. Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of points of clarification for the record. So in staff's presentation, and this is for you, Kirsten, I want to be clear. When we say that we will report all available metrics, or I'm sorry, the word was measures, all available measures under Aspire. Can you confirm what those measures are that we will have available?
I could give you a whole long list, but what I will say, but
Example.
I won't bore you with the details. What I will say is that everything except state assessment growth, which there are two measures, growth to proficiency and median growth percentile. Growth to proficiency is the only measure that is in the high school framework, and the pre-K to 8 framework has median growth percentile and growth to proficiency. Those will not be available. Everything else, including climate measures like re-enrollment and chronic absenteeism, academic measures like access, growth, school selected growth assessments. We will also have state assessment proficiency rates And we are proposing that those be reported as well. What we are proposing we not report is overall Aspire scores, like a summative score, or a level. So everything else except state assessment growth measures would be available and reported.
Perfect. And when you say reported, and I'm specifically interested in the state proficiency data, what does reported mean, and how does that differ from published?
Well, published as in it'll be available on OSSI's website, but we are also proposing that in our Aspire reporting, we show the state assessment proficiency rates by student group, which is how we would normally calculate it. With respect to a full Aspire score, we just would refrain from the overall Aspire score. We would still show your economically disadvantaged students earned a 55% proficient, your students with disabilities earned a 47% proficiency rate. All of that would still be published on our website, just like this year's or 24-25 performance was reported and published, just student group performance and outcomes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Are there any other clarifying questions about staff recommendation or any other thoughts regarding that before we proceed? Board Member Marino, I saw your hand raised. Please.
I don't have clarifying questions, but I'm happy to offer my comments now if that's helpful.
And this is regarding staff recommendations or something else?
I was just responding to your question of general comments earlier. So do you want general comments now, or you want to hold?
Give me some general. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, Kirsten, I want to thank you for your tremendous work, not just the presentation tonight, but to you, to Dr. Walker Davis, to the team. Jim started us off by saying this, but this is not an issue that started today. This started 9 months ago, and I think the team has worked very, very hard to understand what's happening locally, to coordinate with OSSI, and to also look at national practices. And particularly as a new board member, I just want to thank both of you, Dr. Walker Davis and Kirsten, for the time you've spent with me individually helping me understand Aspire. It's really made me a more effective board member. So thank you for going above and beyond to do that. I want to reiterate the points that have been made both by Dr. Tracy White and Justin Lessick, and Jim, I think you were taking us here as well, that this transition to DC CAPE 2.0 is a very big change. And it impacts schools and school communities tremendously. It adds a new kind of pressure on school leaders, and that came through in the engagement process in terms of the magnitude of this change. And so I support the staff's recommendation that we not calculate Aspire scores and that we are not able to use them for goal attainment for schools who use Aspire. I think it was Justin earlier who said it would fundamentally change the Aspire framework to try to calculate scores without growth. It's really not part of how the board and the staff designed the framework. That said, I agree with Tony in that I think we need to raise the bar for accountability. And so I do support some kind of amendment tonight that does not take off the table the idea of using all available data in a supplemental way. So I think I agree, Jim, that we'll have 4 years of data, and that for most schools is going to tell us most of the story, and the goal attainment will be very clear. But Tony, I also agree with you that ultimately, I think we've been tasked with using available data to make good decisions, and this is an important set of data that I think should be used in a supplemental way. So I'd like us to take most of the staff recommendation with a few changes tonight. And I'd also say that I think particularly on the charter goals policy, I see this as an evolving policy that we will come back to in the future. And I hope to see continued public engagement, particularly with school leaders, as we evolve the charter goals policy over time, because it is so critical to our work together with the sector. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Marino. Vice Chair Yan.
Thank you. Mine is largely a clarifying question first. Kirsten, you named the measures that we have available. You provided great detail on the ways that we would be able to look at proficiency, which is very helpful. Between either PCSB or OSCE's reporting of proficiency, is it possible for members of the public to understand relative performance across either the sector or the city? So, for example, to be able to identify whether a school's proficiency level is in the top 90th percentile or the top 50th percentile of relative performance to all of DC, other DC high schools, or all of other charter high schools in DC, for example.
So I can't speak to what OSCE will be reporting. They usually just report the rates themselves for all students and for student groups. So
But would
they
someone be able to, if OSCE continues to do that level of reporting,
Mhm.
presumably someone would be able to run their own calculations for relative performance?
Generally speaking, yes, that gets a little bit complicated when it comes to student groups, given N size requirements for reporting. But for us, what we are proposing is using a scoring range of 0 as the floor and the 90th percentile as the target. So when we do our public reporting, you will be able to see by student group where a school's performance was between 0 and the 90th percentile of statewide performance for that student group. So that's how we are proposing we for PCSB do our reporting.
Okay. So under the current proposal as it stands with the public reporting that would be available, folks would know the relative performance of proficiency levels for our schools.
You would be able to see a school's proficiency rate for a specific student group in relation to the 90th percentile. So 0 is the floor. We wouldn't have the 10th percentile, but we would have the 90th percentile as the target. And so you would see that the school performed somewhere between 0 and the 90th percentile or above.
Okay, that is helpful. And the reason for my questioning is, similar to what Maura named, I'm very supportive of us not calculating Aspire scores for this year. It fundamentally doesn't make sense, nor is it fair to schools. And as I grapple with what the information is that will be out there publicly, I do believe that we need to be transparent, as Tony named, about how we would use any of that public information rather than staying silent on it. And so, that's the area that I just, as we continue to discuss this, want us to be able to be very clear about whether we are using information and also what information will live out in the public no matter what and will be part of anyone's public decision making.
Yep, I just want to clarify that because we are proposing this scoring range, you wouldn't be able to see benchmarks. So
Yep.
it doesn't have the 50th percentile, it doesn't have the 25th percentile for you to measure against. It just would have the 90th percentile, and you'd be able to see where the school is in relation to that. And so I hear what you're saying, but based on, and like I said, in terms of student group reporting, it can be difficult to make those benchmarks based on N sizes for at the school level and at the state level.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Yin. Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Yeah, Kirsten, I'm sorry. Help me out. When you say, first of all, thank you to Vice Chair Yang, because her line of questioning helped me realize that I didn't understand what I thought I understood. So what do you mean when you say you'll be able to see where the school is relative to the 90th percentile? And let me ask you the question a different way. I'm a parent, right, of a child in the charter school system. I want to know proficiency rates for school XYZ for 26-27. What will I see? What will be available to me as a parent from PCSB?
what you will see from PCSB is by measure. So you'll be able to click on state assessment proficiency for ELA. It'll expand and it'll show every student group that we report on in Aspire. And then it will have the rate. So say it's 67%. And so it'll show economically disadvantaged 67%. Now, in the display, we show the scoring range, the floor and the target, which generally is in Aspire shows how many points you get for the measure. Now, we're not calculating points, as I said in this proposal, but it does help to anchor your visual on to understand the relative performance. So if the 90th percentile of statewide performance is, say, 72%, it'll show the 67 coming up very close to the target of 72%.
Okay.
And that would mean that across the state, the 90th percentile of statewide performance for economically disadvantaged students is 72%. And this school got very close to that target for this student group.
But when you say very close, it won't give me the 67.
It'll say 67.
Fine. Okay. 67 of 72 in this example.
It'll show 67 out of 100, and it'll just show the target of 72 marked there. So you'll see that it's close to that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarifying question, Treasurer, and thank you for your comments, Vice Chair Yan. Any other clarifying questions or general remarks before we move forward? All right. Thank you all again. Again, thank you to the school leaders. Thank you to the board for this conversation, and staff again for months and months and months of work. I think the thing that I'm thinking a lot about is both, again, honoring the fact that we want to get information out to schools as they're continuing to plan and move forward, but we want to honor both what is best practice, but then also the truth of the moment and the opportunity to push our sector forward. And so with that, I'm actually going to move to I'll make a motion actually. And with this motion, I'm actually I want to move to approve the revisions to the Aspire policy and technical guide and the charter goals policy with 2 amendments, however. One, first, I'd like to strike any language in either policy that would prevent the board from considering school year 26-27 state assessment performance as supplemental evidence to support high stakes decision making. Secondly, I want to ensure that both policies include consistent language specifying that while DCPCSB will not determine charter goal attainment for school year 26-27 for any impacted school that has adopted Aspire as its goals, DCPCSB will consider performance on all available academic and non-academic measures as supplemental evidence to support high stakes decision making, including charter reviews and renewals for impacted schools. In plain language, y'all, I am proposing that we won't determine charter goal attainment for school year 26-27 for schools impacted by the acclimation period that have adopted Aspire as their goals, which is consistent with what staff is recommending. However, I think the board should be able to use any available data from school year 26-27, including state assessment data, as supplemental evidence to support us in making high stakes decisions like charter reviews and renewals. My motion is to approve these 2 policies with amended language and to ensure that that's possible. Do I have a second?
Second.
Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote as I will cast my vote last.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I think we should have discussion before we have a vote.
I
think that's-
apologize. Thank you so much. Thank you for flagging that, Board Member Sandman. Are there any points for discussion?
I have a comment.
Yes, please, by all means.
I oppose the amendment for the reasons I gave earlier, but for an additional reason. I don't understand it. I don't know what it means to consider 2026-27 DC CAPE 2.0 results as supplemental evidence. Never heard that standard before. Exactly how are we going to consider it? What weight will it be given? The whole purpose of Aspire and of our assessment system is to give schools clear guidance about what our standards are, how we're going to do what we're going to do. I'm a board member, and I don't understand what considering something as supplemental evidence means. If I don't understand it, I suspect that our LEA school leaders don't understand it either. There is no definition around that. That is not a standard. I think that as a regulator, we are obligated to give clear guidance, clearly understandable standards to the regulated entities that we deal with. I don't know what this means.
Thank you, Board Member Sandman. Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
I'm happy to provide my remarks, Chair Adamafania, but do we want to respond to Board Member Sandman right now about what it means? Or should I just go?
I think why don't you go ahead? I want to make sure I get as many comments there, and then we'll move over there.
Sure. So I'm supportive of the amendment because I believe it strikes the appropriate balance between prudence and accountability, similar to Board Member Marino and Board Member Williams. I agree that 26-27, and I'm specifically speaking about the proficiency results. I know Chair Adamafania, you talked about using all available data. I want to be clear that I'm particularly interested in us being able to use the proficiency data for supplemental reasons, so I will name that. I agree that proficiency results should not be used to determine charter outcomes or charter goal outcomes. I'm not suggesting that, and I don't agree with that. However, I am not comfortable adopting a policy that would explicitly prohibit the board from considering potentially relevant information altogether. And I believe proficiency data is relevant information. Our responsibility is to exercise sound judgment based on the full record that we have before us. The amendment that you've proposed preserves that discretion by allowing the board to consider proficiency results as supplemental information when appropriate, while making clear that those results will not be used for charter goal determinations during the acclimation period. In my opinion, a hold harmless year should not be a blindfold year. The approach that you've outlined with the amendment, Chair Adamafania, acknowledges the uncertainty inherent in a new assessment while preserving the board's ability to fulfill its accountability responsibilities if the proficiency data provides meaningful context in any particular case that we have before us.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. And I think, again, hearing your laying out your thought process kind of illustrates, again, just a reminder that the amendment, can someone pull up the amended language for me, please? Thank you. Oh boy. Let's get that to a 150. Okay. Thank you. Again, the amendment as it's written makes very, 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 very clear the results of the new state assessment will not be a factor in charter goal attainment, but rather it is just, to Treasurer Stanley Beatty's point, Board Member Marino, it is just used, and Board Member Williams, Chair Yan, it is just used as supplemental data to continue to support or inform our review of the school. And so I just want to name that. Any other comments, reflections, questions, anything like that? Board Member Williams.
Sure. I just want to reflect that, I understand the concern. I do think the distinction is clear, though. And as you mentioned, Chairwoman, supplemental evidence means that we will not calculate an Aspire score, assign a level, or determine goal attainment based on this data. The policy already says that we are not doing that. It simply means that, if results are reported publicly, the board doesn't have to pretend that we're unaware of them. We can acknowledge the data, understand its limitations, consider it as part of a broader record, and and so really, to me, this is not a backdoor accountability score, no matter how hard we people try to portray it. But what this is transparent oversight and being clear and honest with our LEAs that we too see public data just like they did. And so that to me is the clear distinction here and what this means and why I'm in support of this.
Thank you, Board Member Williams. And again, I think you articulate just the sentiments that board members, oh my gosh, hi baby, what board members in general have shared over the last couple of months. And I think, again, you articulate that quite well. I know, hi baby. Oh my gosh, I need to focus. All right, Board Member Salmon, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to make an additional comment. I get that what we're saying is that we won't use DCK 2.0 for determining whether or not a school has met its charter goals. That's clear. But we will use it as supplemental evidence. And my fellow board members apparently feel very strongly about being able to use it as supplemental evidence because apparently it might be decisive in determining whether we close a school or impose conditions. It will be sufficiently relevant to high stakes decisions that we must have it. That feels like a shell game to me. What we're telling schools is not to worry. We're not going to use it to determine whether you met your charter goals, but we will use it as supplemental evidence, and that could have a really negative impact for you. That seems to me to be ripe for ad hoc decision-making, where schools don't understand and individual board members don't understand what it means to use a factor as important as that as supplemental evidence. What can't we do with it? What can we do with it? What weight will it be given? Unclarity of guidance on the part of a regulator is not good policy making. It's not good decision making. I think this needs more consideration. I don't understand the policy that we're being urged to adopt.
Thank you, Board Member Salmon. Any other thoughts?
Chairman Adamafanian, I don't have a lot more to contribute beyond what's already been said. But I'd say I want this agency to be equipped to take action if warranted with a full suite of information. Indeed, we created Aspire because we wanted a more complete picture of school performance. So I seek and have sought language that would ensure this board are able to make use of information to make a determination. It's just the work of the authorizer. So I appreciate how Board Member Williams and Marino have explained their thoughts on it today, and I support that approach.
Thank you, Leah. Board Member Crucy. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept my my amendments as presented?
I think we had a motion and a second, and so we've
Okay.
now had discussion. And Shakur, are you ready for me to call the
Yes.
vote? Or okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary Moreno.
Vice
right.
Chair Yan.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Sandman.
No.
Board Member Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
I am an aye, and Chair Adamafanian.
Thank you. I am an aye as well. Again, I want to thank the board, the staff, for your reflections on tonight. Again, I believe this revision acknowledges the conversations, the learnings, all that we have captured over this period of time as we move forward. So thank you. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you all for your engagement. Okay, next I'll ask Hannah Cusino, Director in the School Performance Department, to introduce the school expansion policy and the school reorganization policy.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Cusino, and I'm a director in the School Performance Department. DCPCSB staff recommends that its board approve the school reorganization and school expansion policies. The proposed school reorganization policy explains how DCPCSB will evaluate requests for mergers and acquisitions, two types of reorganization strategies. The proposed school expansion policy revises the existing enrollment ceiling increase policy. It describes how DCPCSB will evaluate charter amendment petitions for enrollment ceiling increases, or ECIs, changes in grades served, and campus replications. Both policies now respond to the public comment and board feedback staff received. Before the board votes, staff has prepared a short presentation to situate these policies within DCPCSB's broader oversight and summarize the revisions made. And here are my slides. Okay, so this infographic here is one that we have presented a few times at board meetings. It articulates our vision for the sector. That 1, all schools are excellent and equitable. 2, respond to community needs and family demand. And 3, demonstrate financial sustainability. To bring this vision into focus, DCPCSB develops policies, releases guidance, and uses data to ground our authorizing evaluations in that work. Tonight, we focus on the middle column in this graphic, meeting need and demand. The policies the board will vote on tonight are part of the sector planning policy suite. You'll note that the middle row shows arrows pointing from our accountability and financial oversight policies inward to the sector planning policy suite. This means that when we consider a request to open, expand, or reorganize a school, we take into account academic, financial, need and demand data and those policies in service of that ultimate vision. Next slide. So when we say sector planning, what do we mean? DCPCSB defines sector planning as how we use data, policies, and decisions to shape a charter sector that is quality, responsive, diverse, and sustainable. Those decisions include votes to open, expand, reorganize, and even close schools. Tonight, we focus on those two middle actions, expand and reorganize. Next slide, thanks. So over the past few years, DCPCSB has been developing a suite of sector planning policies and guidelines. As we began seeking input, particularly that from school leaders, we set 3 overall goals. First, we wanted the new school charter application guidelines, school expansion policy, and school reorganization policy to align with Aspire to promote excellent and equitable schools. Second, we heard loud and clear from school leaders that sector planning decisions must be transparent, cohesive, and goal-oriented. We will achieve that by analyzing demand data and those other data sources I mentioned, and establishing a policy framework with shared guiding principles and evaluation processes. And finally, we saw the need to modernize and clarify the rules for opening, expanding, merging, or acquiring schools in recognition of a changing landscape with lower future enrollment. Let's dive deeper into the school reorganization and school expansion policies, since they will be voted on tonight. As I said in my opening remarks, the school reorganization policy creates pathways for mergers and acquisitions. This is a new policy for PCSB, and for the charter authorizing world more broadly. In 2025, we engaged with school leaders, city partners, national organizations, and other authorizers to better understand these practices and draft an overarching policy. The policy for your vote tonight aligns with Aspire and our sector planning pillars, which is that policy framework I alluded to in the previous slide. It incorporates public comment and feedback from the board. The school expansion policy governs how DCPCSB evaluates expansion requests to add students, serve new grades, or replicate an existing campus. It builds on the existing enrollment ceiling increase policy, which was first established in 2010 and has been updated several times. However, as time passed, that policy became outdated. For example, the current iteration relies on DCPCSB's previous accountability framework and does not include specific considerations for adding new grades to an existing grade span. The version for vote tonight incorporates many of the 2026 updates to the school reorganization policy. It also has a broader scope to provide school leaders and school boards with clarity on how DCPCSB will evaluate requests to add new grades or to replicate an existing campus. Okay, so yes, the school reorganization and school expansion policies represent significant external engagement and board discussion. In fact, this is the 6th public meeting this year at which one or both policies have been on the agenda. As staff considered the public comment and the feedback we received, we landed on the following revisions. First, I am pleased to announce the release of the enrollment outlook, the demand analysis prepared for DCPCSB use by the DC Policy Center. In the policy drafts we released earlier this year, we wrote that expanding and reorganizing schools needed to respond to PCSB's demand analysis to inform their case for meeting their enrollment targets. This is that demand. This is that analysis, sorry. This is that analysis. In addition, the minimum eligibility criteria for academics and finance now take performance over time into account. Schools must meet the relevant thresholds for 2 of the 3 preceding years. Finally, the revised policies offer more detail on what conditional approval entails. If the board votes to conditionally approve an expansion or reorganization request, then the charter amendment itself will explain how the school must address the missed standard for approval. And finally, we made a few revisions that are specific to each policy. For the school reorganization policy, we changed the name and scope to focus on reorganization strategies instead of mergers and acquisitions, a term that originates from the business world. During the April meeting, the board discussed expanding the minimum eligibility criteria for merger requests. This suggestion also came up in the public comment we received. A merger is a reorganization strategy in which 2 LEAs, both from places of relative strength, combine to operate under a single charter, offering their students and families new programs or enrollment pathways. Now, all LEAs that earn a level 3 or higher on Aspire in 2 of the 3 preceding years, including the most recent year, are eligible to merge. The policy includes other considerations staff and board may weigh in evaluating these types of requests, including student group performance on Aspire measures. And for the school expansion policy, school leaders ask that the policy allow for a streamlined evaluation process should an enrollment ceiling increase request be de minimis or very small in nature. The policy now creates this streamlined pathway. And that concludes my brief presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I just have one clarifying question. In the meeting materials, you included the enrollment outlook, which analyzes the demand for a proposed school. Please provide an overview of the enrollment outlook, its development, and how it will be used moving forward.
Yes. So the enrollment outlook replaces PCSB's existing sector planning supplement. Historically, we've always had a demand analysis in which PCSB uses, as well as we require schools to use to inform their case for demand. And when I use that word demand, I'll use PCSB's like official definition. That's the ability for the proposal to meet its enrollment targets. So we're looking at sources of data in the enrollment outlook that pertain to your ability to meet enrollment targets. There are 3 specific metrics. One is there a need for new seats in that grade band or for that program? So we're looking at that from an elementary, middle, high, adult, and alternative perspectives and incorporating data to demonstrate if there is a need or not for new seats. The second metric pertains to, is there excess demand from families for that particular program? So what else is existing in the educational landscape that relates to this proposed program? And how does that school perform in terms of waitlist to enrollment ratios or the re-enrollment of economically disadvantaged students? That's a more straightforward case to make in the context of expansion or reorganization requests, because we're going to be looking at the school's data. But if there was like a new school request, new schools would then have to identify some like schools in order to show that families want this type of a program. And then finally, the third metric relates to, is there excess demand for this particular location for the proposed grade band? So there we are looking at data elements like the ratios of students in that neighborhood cluster to the schools that already exist. We're also looking at some broader numbers of where students live in DC to determine the likelihood that families would enroll their students at a school in that location. And the last thing I'll say about that metric is where schools have the opportunity to describe whether they are looking for more of like a citywide enrollment or for something that's more tailored to that specific neighborhood cluster. And as you can imagine, like that also depends on the grade band served, the program served as well.
Got it. Thank you.
So yeah, one more point I'll make,
Please.
is that so this was work we developed in consultation with the DC Policy Center. It's an analysis that looks at data over time, frequently like over a 3-year mark. And it is something that we intend to update annually to take into account newer data.
Got it. Thank you. Vice Chair Yan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hannah, and to the entire PCSB staff for the time spent on both of these policies, and in particular on the reorganization policy, which I think puts us at the starting line across the nation in terms of having policies here. And really appreciate the revisions that you all laid out here as well to reflect feedback from the board, from public meetings, public comment. And then to the DC Policy Center for working with us on the enrollment outlook. I think it's an incredibly important document. I hope that it is a document that we can and will proactively share with LEAs, not just folks who may be pursuing applications or coming to us with their ideas, but rather one that we make everyone aware of. There are a lot of important data points in there, and I'm just going to call out one of them as an example for folks, which is that over the by 2030 and to the 2031 school year, we expect to see a decrease of 4,000, close to 4,000 new seats for DC public and public charter schools. And so I think it's just important for us all to be grounded in the fact that our landscape for students is going to change over the next couple years. And I think that having a strong proactive reorganization policy allows us and our schools to work from a more proactive position and think about how they are going to continue to innovate and improve in the context of fewer seats in the system, which means fewer students and fewer resources going towards our schools. It's going to change things across the board for all of our schools. And so I do want this to be a document that doesn't just live on our website or isn't something that folks are only referring to once they are planning an application, but rather something that all schools are considering as they think about their trajectory towards improvement.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Yan. Board Member Williams?
I could be quick and just say, everything that Michelle said, plus one. I think I just really want to say, Hannah, to you, to the entire staff, thank you so much for the time that you all have taken on this policy, the careful conversations that you've had with the public, with school leaders, with us as a board, and the engagement around this. I know this was one that when I first appointed this board came up and we asked for a little bit more time on, and I spent a lot of time, asking about how does this align with our vision and where we want to be as an authorizer. And that the work that you all have done both to educate me but also the revisions that you walked through, I think really have gotten it there for me. I think this is a wonderful balance of the level of accountability and rigor that we need as the sector, as we plan the sector, but along with encouraging that innovation that's so critical to charter schools and that are unique to what charter schools bring. So this is really just me, and I've been long-winded here, but I just want to say a real thank you for how you've engaged us as a board and the public here together. So thank you, and look forward to voting on this policy.
Thank you. Treasurer Stanley Beatty?
Thank you, Chair Adamafania. My comments are really just a follow-up to Vice Chair Yan. She was getting to my train of thought as it relates to the enrollment outlook, Hannah. I just wanted to be clear. So for LEAs to use the enrollment outlook, the data, what we are asking is that they use the document to answer the questions to the metrics, right? Like yep. We're offering these metrics and we want them to be thoughtful about responding to the metrics in the case of any type of reaction to the reorg policy. But really what we're saying is use the data in the enrollment outlook to respond to the metrics, right? I just want to be clear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Schools are also encouraged to provide other examples of concrete evidence that they might have that maybe exists outside of the scope of the citywide data. But nonetheless, if one of our goals was to create a transparent policy framework, making sure that we all have access to common data to talk about a topic like demand, like meeting enrollment targets, I think is really essential to that.
That's a better way of saying it. The enrollment outlook establishes a piece of common data. And then you mentioned that that we would update it. Did you say the frequency with which it would be updated?
Yes. The intention is annual.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I, just in closing, I wanted to echo Board Member Williams. I'm appreciative of the revisions and amendments that you all have made to both policies in response to the feedback that you've gotten from the board. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Board Member Crucy?
Just so much gratitude, Hannah. This has predated most members of the board here. And you may have even left and come back again in a second to work on some of this.
I had one kid at the start of this work and I have two now.
Literally a lifetime of work. So much appreciation. I should have said the same explicitly to Kirsten in the last section here. There's so much work that goes into all of this. And I am really proud to be part of this, just modeling the autonomy and the innovation that we can. We must do this. A couple of years ago, there was this boundary study that technically existed outside of charters, and yet we're modeling using information to plan and to be responsive and to anticipate. So I'm just really proud to be part of that. These are really difficult realities coming before us. And the reason why we're having the hard decisions we have before us often are those that require making very tough choices. So being able to chart a path forward, to be able to anticipate that when these realities come before us, I'm just grateful for all that you've done, and grateful for all the newer board members who've been asking really good questions to get us to this point where we can do it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Crucy. Hannah, one last question from me. Can you speak to, should the board approve these policies, what does implementation look like, and how will DCPCSB staff support school leaders and boards alike?
Great question. First, implementation begins immediately. After you vote on this tonight, should these two policies be approved, PCSB will release related applications that pertain to these policies. So kind of what Secretary Stanley Beatty was mentioning, kind of asking about like, well, what does it really look like to incorporate the enrollment outlook? Well, there's questions in the application that, you have to specifically respond to. So we provide guidance to schools of exactly what we're looking for when they make these requests of us. We also intend to release some one-pager summaries of these two policies, and that's a practice that we will be exploring implementing even more widely so that school leaders and boards, recognizing the importance of governance here, have a real clear understanding of what PCSB is evaluating and looking at in each of its policies. And finally, there is a step in the evaluation process for both policies related to this like notice of exploration. And we encourage schools to come to us as they are thinking strategically about the future, whether they think an expansion is on the horizon for them or a merger or an acquisition, so that we can begin those conversations earlier, identify some of the strengths and potential areas of concern. It also provides an opportunity for PCSB to connect school leaders with other organizations that can provide more targeted support, support and guidance that really falls outside of our jurisdiction as the authorizer, ultimately responsible for evaluation decisions pertaining to reviews and renewals. But there are other local organizations that are prepared to step up and provide that guidance that is needed to make these policies successful.
Got it. Thank you so much. All right. Board, are there any other questions or comments regarding these policies or clarifications to ask to Hannah? All right. Colleagues, I will now entertain a motion. If there are no objections, I propose we vote on both policies jointly. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the revisions to the school expansion policy and the school reorganization policy.
I'll second.
Thank you. Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote as I will cast my vote.
Vice Chair Yan.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Sandman.
Aye.
Board Member Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Chair Adamafanian.
I am an aye as well. Again, thank you to the staff. Thank you to the public for your contribution to shaping this policy. I'm excited about what that means for our future. Appreciate it. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Great work. All right. I will now yield the floor to Treasurer Stanley Beatty to introduce the finance report. Treasurer?
Thank you, Chair Adamafani. In the interest of time, I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Henderson.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Will Henderson. I had some camera theatrics here, so I was moving around a bit. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at DC PCSB. and I am here for our monthly financial oversight report. In May, our Finance Committee met to continue refining the draft of our financial oversight policy, which we're excited to speak a little bit more about later this evening. I do want to take a moment to provide a specific update on DC Wildflower Public Charter School, which is on a financial corrective action plan, or an FCAP. Their third quarter financial statements were in compliance with their FCAP, and additionally, DC PCSB deemed that the LEA's draft budgets for FY27 and 28 were reasonable. And the LEA was able to successfully extend its OSSI loan, originally maturing in 27 and 20, and originally maturing in FY27 to FY30. The next FCAP milestone that you'll hear a report from me will be at the August board meeting. I can also report that since our May 18th board meeting, PCSB has not issued any new citations of fiscal concern, and there have been no changes to the financial monitoring list. In keeping with our tradition, we use the monthly report time to update and educate our community on other school finance-related matters. And so today, we are releasing the FY25 Financial Analysis Report, or the FAR, and my colleague Katie Rickman has joined us to share some learnings from the FY25 FAR. So we are going to share a brief presentation to share a little bit about where we are on that. So the agenda for our conversation today on the next slide is we are going to review quickly the purpose and key components of the FAR, but we're going to spend a few minutes talking about who uses the FAR and why it's beneficial to them, and also speak about some key sector insights. Katie?
Thank you. Well, if we can go to the
We've got some technical challenges here for a moment.
Can y'all hear me?
There we go. That's better.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Can we go over to the next slide?
Yep.
Please. Thank you. Okay. To begin, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the financial analysis report. The purpose of the FAR is to assess the financial health of each LEA using a consistent methodology and to identify areas of potential financial risk. The FAR is an annual analysis based on audited financial statements that translates results into standardized indicators, trends, and observations that can be compared across LEAs. It's really important to note, though, that it's not a budget review or a financial forecast. The FAR looks backward at audited results rather than projecting future performance. The FAR really matters because it promotes transparency, consistency, and informed oversight by providing a common framework for understanding financial conditions across the sector. Going into the next slide, I would like to discuss who uses the FAR and how. For LEAs, the report serves as a tool to better understand their overall financial condition and trends for the fiscal year being reviewed. It can help inform governance discussions, support strategic planning efforts, and provide a consistent framework for comparing financial performance through standardized metrics and reporting structures. The FAR is also really valuable to external partners. It can supplement their own due diligence processes and provide insight into sector-level norms and expectations related to financial oversight and financial health. For DC PCSB, the FAR really helps ground conversations with LEAs in a shared set of data and consistent financial thresholds. It also supports the equitable and transparent application of our financial oversight expectations across the sector. Going into the next slide here, there are several key points to keep in mind when reviewing and interpreting the FAR. First, the report provides a number of benefits. It creates a shared language for discussing financial health. It may help communicate financial risk before conditions worsen, and it supports fairness and consistency by applying the same methodology across all LEAs. It's also important to remember that the report also has limitations. The FAR does not predict enrollment or funding levels, and it does not reflect academic performance. It's solely focused on financial condition. And because it uses a standardized approach across the sector, it provides limited LEA-specific content. So for the timing and the process, it begins only after audited financial statements have been finalized. Internally producing the FAR involves financial calculations across all LEAs, trend analysis, review of audit findings, debt covenants, and any going concern language. LEAs are also given the opportunity to review their draft financial report card and provide like factual clarifications or additional context regarding our observations. And this is done before the reports are finalized. In addition to the individual LEA analysis, the FAR also presents combined financial statements that provide a view of the overall financial health of the sector. Going into the next slide, I think the final point that I'd like to cover is how the FAR assesses and supports financial health. So the FAR evaluates financial health using a combination of key financial indicators, or KFIs as they're also known, across several areas, including operating sustainability, liquidity, cash generation, and operational discipline. However, it is very important to note that no single KFI defines financial health. Instead, risk is identified when multiple KFIs point in the same direction, particularly when those trends persist over time. The FAR is not intended to simply identify risk. It also helps inform how DCPCSB supports LEAs. That support includes targeted financial conversations grounded in the FAR indicators, clear communication of expectations tied to specific risks, and when appropriate, an increased cadence of financial review. The emphasis is really on early course correction rather than last-minute intervention. The goal is stabilization and improvement rather than just compliance for its own sake. Ultimately, the FAR really creates an environment where LEA boards can use financial information in the same way that DCPCSB does to identify risks early, support informed decision-making, and strengthen their long-term financial health. So with that context in mind, I'll turn it back over to Will to continue the discussion of the FAR, walk through the key insights from the fiscal year 25 report. Will?
Thanks, Katie. So each year when we complete the work of the FAR, several things stand out that are unique about that particular year. In FY25, in particular, the financial situation for our schools changed. The COVID-19 pandemic funding expired, personnel costs continued to rise. The one-time public charter school teacher compensation grant ended, and we had a lot of inflationary pressure in our city. And so the DC government approved a historic 12% increase in the UPSF formula funding for that year, and our schools felt it. However, and we're grateful for that. However, it was also important to note that occupancy costs continue to rise. In FY24, the average occupancy cost was 123% of the current facilities allotment. In FY25, that increased to school spending 133% on average of their facilities allotment, indicating that the gap from the funding needed to support those schools and the funding that is provided by the city continues to grow. When we looked at our schools, while at large, the sector remained strong and healthy. Schools that were particularly healthy financially had positive or at least stable operating margins over several years. They had adequate liquidity. They had predictable enrollment patterns, and they were able to manage their debt relative to assets and revenues. We did have a handful of schools that had poor financial health, and trends there showed repeated operating deficits, low days of cash, or enrollment volatility. These are items that we are mindful of, and we use the FAR along with the rest of our oversight work to track and monitor and support those schools, as Katie said. And so on the final slide here, I do want to say that as we complete and deliver the FAR for FY25, we can move on to the next slide. We want to just highlight too far. There we go. We want to highlight that, or I would like to highlight that this team has worked hard to make the FAR a more valuable instrument for the city and for our schools. We are releasing the FAR nearly 6 months earlier than we have in years past, and we have changed operational functionality of our reporting and evaluative work such that we can maintain that early delivery. We have, you can see a couple of the bullet points here. Our timelines are more concise. Our communication with schools is earlier. We created an environment to help schools predict and therefore meet timelines for submission of the content after their audits are due. And we believe that this work will make the FAR a more useful tool. It is always going to be on a lag because of the submission timelines, but this early release prior to the kickoff of the summer we believe will help make this a more meaningful tool for you all, our board, but also to the city, our school leaders, and importantly, our schools board. So I have a lot of gratitude for Katie Rickman and Valeria Sanders, who have been in the weeds working and refining these processes. And we've learned a lot from our schools and other leaders in the sector that have been instrumental in changing these operational practices for this tool. So as always, I welcome questions from the board at this time.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. And thank you for the sharing the detail and to Kathleen, thank you so much for your sharing as well. All right, board member Treasurer Stanley Beatty, let's start with you with your questions.
Thank you, Chair Adamafania, and thank you, Will, to you and your team. I echo all the comments that you made in your words of gratitude to your team for the hard work that you guys have done. I just have a few questions. A couple of them are points of clarification. Let's start with, you mentioned that you all were successful in getting the FAR out 6 months earlier this year than you typically do. For the good of the public, when is the FAR expected to be published? When can they expect it to be released each year?
We intend to release it around this time. So sometime in June, I think, early July, the latest, but we intend to get it out at the start of the summer.
Okay. And where does it live?
It lives on our website. If you just Google, go into the search bar from our website, it lives in the same space near the monitoring list, which is a link that we've shared several times before.
Yeah, I can add to that. So the specific tab that you'll go to is the financial oversight on the hub, under the transparency hub.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Perfect.
Will, you mentioned that the FAR is a tool that will help PCSB identify risks early. Given that it is a what do you call it? I always confuse retrospective and prospective. Given that it is a retrospective document, how do we use it to identify potential risks? Like how do you use it as a tool in that manner?
In famous words of our treasurer, we use it to look for trends. I mean, we have several FAR reports over time, and so it is a retrospective, and it is not the only tool. But if you'll take as folks you and others will take a look at the FAR itself, it speaks to the trends that we can see. We can observe enrollment challenges, and we can observe schools that over several years are not overcoming one-time challenges. So that's the simplest way of approaching that.
one of the examples of that, Will, would be the call out that you made even this evening about rising occupancy costs,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
About how it's increased from, I think it was one, I'm doing it from memory, but from 126 to 133%, right?
Yeah,
So
123 to 133, but yeah, that's right.
133. Yeah, so that's something that the FAR itself would uncover. And my next question for you, or my thought would be that we would use those types of trends to perhaps look at KFIs, or to figure out if we need to do some fine tuning with our own sort of analysis or how we're evaluating LEAs. Is that true? Like, how would you use the trend data and trend information to potentially tweak and change what we're doing from an analysis perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great way of approaching it. I think so. Moving away from just thinking about one specific school, which is a bit of how I answered the first part of your question, looking at trends for one school. We use the FAR to get better at our craft. You know, if we have a school that is clearly showing challenges and the FAR is not helping us uncover that through a 10, we're going to use that information to refine our approach to KFIs, and we're going to speak a little bit about that in as we think about implementation about our financial oversight policy that we're going to speak about a little bit later this evening. So we use it to learn and evolve our practice for sure.
And then on the topic of the financial policy that we're going to propose tonight, how might what you've learned in the FAR, or excuse me, how might the policy, it's the other way around, how might the policy change the FAR?
So the policy is going to help us zoom in specifically on what the School Reform Act has clarified. What the law says our role is in closing a school, and so our policy is going to offer some additional clarification about the three categories of revocation expectations that SRA gives. And so we would expect the FAR, first, we would expect that policy will influence the way that we implement our oversight. So one particular way is that we are going to offer a more robust approach to the mismanagement category. And so in time, that will start showing up in the FAR, and we'll do that and have already done that in collaboration with our schools. But that kind of content ought to start showing up in the FAR. Similarly, some lessons learned through the engagement process in the policy work, both with our LEAs and with you all and with the broader community. We have learned a lot about how we might approach and understand viability for our schools. And so how can we make the most transparent and also simple way to intervene in a timeline that gives a school a fighting chance to make the best decision for their students in a way that's not massively disruptive. So we do anticipate that it will the FAR will evolve in time after the policies voted on.
Yep. And then last question, as it relates to the FAR, we use it, PCSB uses it, or can use it to identify trends, to identify risks. And then obviously we're evaluating the data on an annual basis. Stakeholders, for example, like a financier, may use it as Kathleen, I'm calling her Hannah. Kathleen mentioned a stakeholder like a financier or a traditional bank may use it in replace of their own diligence, right? How might an LEA board use the FAR?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. So really, they should be using it in a way just to become familiar really with the KFIs and what each perspective each is trying to provide. And then what the trends that they see of those KFIs and reviewing them over time to like monitor those trends and let that inform their conversations that they would be having with their leaders. And use the FAR really to ask questions, plan strategically, and help potentially set goals as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Are there any other questions from the board? Again, Will, thank you to the team. Thank you for all your hard work. Treasurer Stanley Beatty, thank you again for providing this update. Much appreciation. All right, Will, stay right there because I'm now going to turn it over to you and invite you to introduce the new financial oversight policy.
Thanks, Chair. We're going to flip-flop our decks. All right. So tonight, staff will be recommending that we open for public comment the financial oversight policy that we have been working on over this last year. Yeah, so this is, if we move on to slide 3, we have been reflecting on our financial oversight and evolving and refining it as we go in recent years, or in recent months, excuse me. We began this conversation early when we were anticipating the cliff of COVID funding. Our schools were aware of that. They were tracking towards that. When I was a school leader, this was very present, or in leadership at a school, this was very present on my mind. Certainly the Eagle Academy closure was a challenging one for the sector and for families and our other schools that were involved. And so that urged us to consider how we were approaching financial oversight. The council and other partners had a desire for us to have a more explicit interpretation of the School Reform Act in the form of financial oversight policy. And as I spoke about earlier with the FAR presentation, there was a hunger from us and our treasurer and others to have more clarification of the definitions laid out in the School Reform Act. So today, next slide, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our timeline, our engagement, the policy structure itself, the criteria laid out in the policy, and then hope to vote to open for public comment. So first off, it's important to know that financial oversight is one of the duties of the authorizer of DC PCSB. And we have placed a very high value on the multiple parties that this particular policy will impact. We did a landscape analysis. We talked to dozens of folks about from various perspectives about what the landscape, the current financial landscape was of our sector. We looked at, did a deep dive on 4 schools, studying what happened to them, some of which were in financial distress and failed, and some of which that were in financial distress and recovered. We spoke to LEA leaders. We spoke to LEA financial leaders. We spoke to lenders. We spoke to this board. We spoke to LEA board members, and we had a working group of school leaders that helped us consider how we should approach this policy. Moving on to the timeline, in June of 2025, we did that landscape analysis and collected a lot of recommendations from the community. We can move on to the next slide. And then in August, we drafted some initial definitions for our finance committee to review and to deliberate on. In the fall, we continued to draft and revise that language and floated that around the community that we were engaging with. In this calendar year, the Finance Committee discussed at length various different perspectives, and we deliberated, incorporated their feedback, and revised and refined the policy. In March and April, we oriented the school finance team, so staff here, even more deeply than their engagement had already been. And then we together implemented a financial policy working group. At the June 9th charter leaders meeting, we had an opportunity for have a table talk for schools to specifically ask us about the policy that we had floated around. And then we did some more in-depth orientation with the additional board members, those that are not on the finance committee. And that brings us to today. In all of this work, in addition to the board and the finance committee itself, I'd be remiss if I'd not offer a word of thank you to Yield Creative, who's been an influential group just in addition to their expertise and their guidance, just more hands on deck to be able to meet the level of engagement that we felt like was appropriate for this policy. So if we move on to the next, yeah, perfect. So I just want to take a moment to talk kind of big picture about how about policies in general. So autonomy is a concept that we rightly emphasize a great deal with charter schools, but it's also the case that charters are subject to a host of legal requirements from different sources. The main one is, of course, the School Reform Act, but there are lots of others that include federal law, laws from OSSI, the IRS regulations, and DC Council requirements, like new governing board requirements. One of the roles that PCSB plays is to channel an amalgam of requirements into a clear set of expectations. The board's primary vehicle for doing this are the charter agreements, which is a performance contract, and our board policies. Internally, then it gets to the staff level at PCSB. It becomes leadership and staff's responsibility to translate the board's policies into clear guidance and aligned practices that are flexible enough to adapt to an individual school circumstances and situations. So these two charts sort of have helped me over time understand how we get from big picture into what it feels like at the school level. So here in today's conversation, we are kind of sitting in this blue oval here, in particular in the board policies. We're introducing a board policy that funnels down from the School Reform Act into what we will be asking this board to vote on. All right, so now I'm moving into the policy document itself, which is available to the public at this time and has been floated around with our schools. The policy is structured, has 4 sections. There's an introduction, and there are definitions that came up over time that we needed to make sure had offered clarity in the policy itself. Then the policy speaks to the standards outlined in the policy and also staff's and this board's decision-making norms. All right, so I've spoken about the School Reform Act several times. In the School Reform Act, it lays out 3 statutory bases for revocation on financial grounds. That includes things like specifying, and we needed to offer some additional clarity from the School Reform Act, including specifying non-adherence to GAAP. GAAP stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles for those who are not steeped in the financial community. And we also needed to define what pattern of non-adherence means. We needed to be specific around fiscal mismanagement issues, such as procurement practices and financial control issues that may give rise to findings of fiscal mismanagement, and then also what the measure for economic viability is. The policy also sets expectations for the timing of decisions while ensuring that there is an exigent circumstance carve-out that enables this board to act at any time an emergency financial situation arises at a school. We evaluate each of the 3 statutory bases that you'll see in the chart in a few slides based on certain criteria and performance expectations. Criteria sources indicate where the standards for evaluating schools come from. The sources can be independently validated rather than based on subjective PCSB judgment. For example, with respect to GAAP non-adherence, the source is the professional standard that independent auditors follow. In other cases, such as for procurement, it's based on existing legal standards or standards that the school has established for itself in its financial policies and procedures. The expectation column will indicate where the bar is for satisfactory performance on a given topic. All right, so these next 3 slides speak to the specifics of the 3 pillars of our policy. Here you can see the expectations for pattern of non-adherence. The criteria source is GAP standards, and our expectation is that there is a clean audit and unmodified opinion. In our next cheat sheet chart, as we think about the pattern of fiscal mismanagement, there are several additional sources here. GAP accounting standards, the LEA's board's financial policies and procedures, the conflicting interest transactions, the school management contracts, and 501c3 board fiduciary duties. These expectations are outlined here in the right column for each of those sources. And you can see a little bit as you read that column how what we define as high quality financial experience. In on the third section here about economic non-viability, our source is PCSB's key financial indicators. We often call those KFIs. That are calculated based on data from our annual audited financials and quarterly unaudited financials. And our expectation is that our schools continuously operate in a way that will enable the school to remain a going concern at minimum through the end of their current school year. The Finance Committee had extensive discussion about the time horizon for economic non-viability. I'm still on the non-viability slide. We can back up one. And the further out projection is made, as you can imagine, the further out a projection is made, the more speculative it becomes. One of the committee's priorities for the board is to make decisions earlier in the school year, which also has the benefit of extending the view for a current year assessment. Another committee priority of our finance committee was to base the assessment on actual confirmed revenue rather than speculative revenue, such as grants that had not yet been secured. And with respect to enrollment, every school's primary source of revenue, our schools only have confirmed revenue for the current school year. Therefore, the default for this determination is to evaluate the school's viability as a going concern through the end of the current year. And lastly, which is not articulated on the slide itself, I just want to draw attention to the policies section called exigent circumstances, which is a provision that allows for the extension of the time horizon if and when the board deems that to be necessary, and especially if a financial performance issue comes to the board later in the school year. So the policy offers a priority for taking action early in the school year, but gives space in emergency scenarios to take action later in the school year. So on to the final slide here with our proposed next steps. We are recommending that we open for public comment now, which that period will close on August 31st. And we would plan to have a public hearing in the board meeting on August 31st and aim for this board to vote on our policy in September. So thanks for taking the time to listen to the work that has gone into and the standards laid out in the financial oversight policy that we are opening tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Will. Treasurer Stanley Beatty, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair Adamafania. Thank you again, Will, and thank you to the Yield team, who I think is listening, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you to both of you. Just a few questions and points of clarification. Will, you mentioned or you talked about when you laid out the SRA and sort of the statutory basis, you talked about how we had to come up with definitions. And I just want to sort of emphasize that a big part of this work was centering ourselves around, obviously, the SRA to start. But from there, we actually had to define what that meant, right? Mm-hmm. Because as you said, pattern doesn't come with a definition, nor does economic viability. And so to do this work, similar to what we heard before with the other policies that we've adopted, to do this work, you really do have to come to it with sort of a basis of common understanding. And as easy as that sounds, for people that's never done policy, as easy as that sounds, it's actually not easy at all. And so I just want to draw attention to how much of the work was around that, right? Whether it's defining pattern, whether it's defining economic viability, and even to the point that you made, sort of making sure that we were clear about how we define certain revenue sources, right? If we're going to call something like, I think we had cash or liquidity, like you actually have to draw a circle around all of those definitions, because I think you and I even got into, well, what are you calling liquidity? Because I call it something different, right?
Yeah.
So you have to come to terms about all of that before you can put it in the four corners of a document. So I just want to highlight that. The other thing I want to raise is you mentioned that this policy allows us to act early. Talk about, for the board and for stakeholders, how this policy in practice will allow you to act earlier, to identify distress and make decisions about that distress in a timely manner.
Yeah, I might frame it even slightly differently, Treasurer, and that's that the policy asks us to act earlier, not just allows, but it encourages us to. So that's based in the fact that our families, the students that go to the schools in charter LEAs in DC, those families have made a choice to participate in that school, regardless of the financial state of the school. A family has chosen to be there, and so the policy asks us to the best of our ability, honor that opportunity for choice. And so so when we have to make a challenging decision about school closure, the policy encouraged us to the best of our ability to do that, such that a family then could choose to participate in a different school if theirs was closing. So where your question is going, though, is of course into implementation. What happens once the policy exists? What happens boots on the ground? How does a school leader understand what they need to do to make sure that their school is financially healthy enough to continue on into the next year? And so a couple of points. So first off, the policy also asks staff to release implementation guidance annually going forward. We've had a set of standards that were generally available to schools, but not easily accessible and not always transparent enough to our school leaders. And so we will be releasing that annually going forward. So a school leader knows what we're going to be holding them accountable to. And that will articulate thresholds for when we do all the rest of our traditional oversight work, which we've spoken about a lot over the last 18 months or 2 years. And so the policy also creates an environment where staff, even before we bring a recommendation to put a school on the monitor, or before we put a school on the monitoring list or bring a recommendation for a financial corrective action plan to you all, or heaven forbid, make a recommendation for revocation. The way that the policy breaks apart the three categories of the School Reform Act allows us to clarify what it is that a school is finding challenging, which helps us become more transparent, gives us more pointed guidance for helping a school plot a path towards health. And these timelines impact the path that we will help plot. So if you think about an FCAP, if there's an ambiguous timeline for when you all are encouraged or asked to act, then that ambiguous timeline informs the ambiguity that might be in an FCAP for a challenged school. However, if we are trying to help you all make a choice to keep the school open or to close a school by given a certain timeline, then the content that goes into the personalized financial corrective action plan is going to change. Furthermore, as has already occurred, our practices for oversight have already evolved in alignment with the definitions that we're proposing today, such that we can intervene earlier and coordinate and collaborate with the school sooner. A bit about what we talked about in the FAR. It is helping us. This and the corresponding implementation guidance is going to help us track and monitor trends differently. You've encouraged us to consider trend analysis more overtly, Treasurer, and certainly beyond just you, your colleagues, folks in the sector, and other school leaders have said that there is more to the story that is can be outlined in the trend analysis. And so this policy and the accompanying implementation guidance will draw attention to those trends so that we can intervene sooner and help a school make the decisions that they need to run, in essence, a healthy nonprofit that serves these students.
Thank you for that, Will. In terms of how LEAs are going to interact with this policy, what are we going to do to support them? What are we going to do to make sure that they understand not only the four corners of the document, but how to interact with it and what that means, like on a practical basis for them? If things seem to be different, how do we support them?
Yeah, so they have interacted with this policy a lot, and I'm very grateful to the school leaders and the financial leaders in the sector. They've already had tons of interaction with the policy itself. Additionally, we have released the skeleton implementation guidance about how staff will behave to schools. And in large part, I think that you are aware, and I'm pleased to share that at this point in time, it is memorializing our current practice. And our practice has refined and strengthened a lot in the last 18 months. Just one small data point, the clarity and the communication that we've had with our schools has led several of our schools to move closer towards financial health, as is represented by the number of schools on the monitoring list. It's decreased dramatically over the last 18 months. That's due to improved financial health. But in keeping with the spirit of this policy and certainly the spirit of PCSB broadly, we intend to create an opportunity for schools to give us feedback about what the implementation looks like for the year, and we'll have a time. The specifics of a timeline will be released a little bit in the future. But before we staff make modifications to the release that we'll be doing annually, probably in the spring, we will be incorporating feedback from schools about what it looked and felt like in their school. So we will continue to collaborate with them about the implementation guidance. And also our team, I mentioned Katie and Valeria earlier, but also our director of school finance, Joanna Hahn, will spend earlier portions of the year engaging in the next school year, engaging with our schools about how the implementation guidance should inform the reporting that schools do to us through the years.
Perfect. And then that was my last question, Will, and you got to it already. The implementation guide, you said that you've already released a framework of it. That document I'll say it this way, that will be the more live of the two, right? Because that document we expect to be regularly updated and revised. To your point, to get to whatever we're learning or whatever we want to change in the face of additional information, new information, refreshed information. So the guide is the liver of the two documents.
Exactly. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Treasurer.
Chair Adamafania.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Are there any other questions, comments from board members? All right, seeing none. Colleagues, I will now entertain a motion.
I move to open the financial oversight policy for public comment.
Thank
I
you. Do I
second.
have excellent. Secretary Marino, please conduct the roll call vote.
Vice Chair Yan,
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Cruzy,
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
I am an aye. Chair Adamafanian.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Again, thank you, Will. Thank you, team, for your work on this. Looking forward to the public comment. All right. Next, we'll vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record? I will start off with I state I am recused from Center City Public Charter School. Are there any other recusals? Treasurer Stanley Beatty Mundo Verde is on the list.
Thank you, Chair Adamafania. You are correct. I'm recused from voting on Mundo Verde Public Charter School. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. All right. Seeing no other recusals, colleagues, I'll now entertain a motion.
I move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Very good. Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote.
Vice Chair Yan,
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty,
Aye, with the exception of my recusal.
Board Member Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Cruzy,
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
I am an aye. Chair Adamafanian.
I, with the exception of my recusal from Center City Public Charter School. Thank you. All right. Is there any new business? All right. Since we've completed tonight's agenda, if there are no objections, I now declare this meeting adjourned and us sent to summer recess. Yeah, I think that's it. All right, y'all. Happy summer. Board Member Cruzy, thank you for everything. Appreciate you. All right, everybody. Let's get to a beach.
Thanks everyone for the kind words.
Of
Thank
course.
you, guys.
Take care.
All
Good
right.
night.